geophysicist by profession, an environmentalist at heart, and a trainer by passion, enlighten us about the present and future of sustainable practices in water management. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here. It's a privilege to be talking on this platform. So, as you said in the introduction, I'll take it one by one. So, as a geophysicist, I've had the opportunity to see what lies beneath the surface, literally. That's what we do. And when you do that across thousands of sites in India and abroad, you begin to understand how deeply misaligned our water practices are with the realities of the subsurface and nature's design. What, what nature has been accumulating in the belly for thousands of years. Actually, I did a project, River Saraswati, when we took out the water from the belly, and it was around 10,000 years old. And the way we are using that water today, so you start wondering, what are we doing with it? From an environmentalist lens, sustainability in water management must start with respect. Respect for the source, for the recharge zones, for natural drainage systems, and for the aquifers that take decades or centuries to build but are depleted in matter of years. So that is the environmentalist lens. So the present, to be honest, is a mixed bag. We have islands of excellence, no doubt about that. We have some smart village level water budgeting projects. We have increasing use of treated wastewater and catchment restoration initiatives. But at a broader level, we are still firefighting. We are still trying to address to the issues as and when the problems are cropping up. We are digging deeper bore wells, chasing groundwater with little recharge, and treating surface water bodies as dumping grounds. So this is where we are today, right? If you start talking of examples in the last presentation of the last speaker, there were some very beautiful examples how things are being done nicely. But at the same time, at a broader level, if you see, in most of the areas, in most of the colonies also where we stay, let's say in NCR and Noida and things like this, every year people are going for deeper and deeper bore wells because, as I said, we are chasing groundwater. At the same time, what gives me hope is the future. And the future lies in integration, integrating traditional wisdom with cutting edge technology. We always knew about water very well. We knew how to use, our ponds, our water bodies, boweries, things like this. Today, we have got best of the technologies. So we need satellite monitoring, AI-driven analytics, geophysical tools like electrical methods, airborne methods, heliborne methods, GPR, seismic systems, etc., to map aquifers. As I said in my presentation, also, you cannot manage something which you don't understand. So, map aquifers, identifying recharge potential. That's another very surprising fact which I can share with you. Mostly, we have got one particular type of recharge structure which is being suggested in different cities. It won't work like that. The recharge potential of ground is different at different places. The recharge structures have to be suitable as per the ground condition there. So identify recharge potential and monitor changes. Monitoring is very important. What you are doing today, how is it affecting the ground situation? For example, you have put recharge structures in a particular area. Is your groundwater level changing with this intervention? So monitoring is very important. We also need decentralized governance. That is something I'll keep harping upon always. We need decentralized governance. We need to move away from a centralized governance to decentralized governance because water is a local issue. Community ownership is very, very important. It cannot be municipal ownership. It has to be community ownership. And of course, behavioral changes. People need to understand it like they understood it earlier. because earlier they were the owner of the resource, so they knew it better, how to manage it. Today, though, they feel disconnected, so they don't really bother about managing it. So that behavioral change has to come. And we as adults are very difficult to change. I don't expect us to change. But children, they can change very fast. They can learn very fast. And ultimately, they can become the change agents. If you take a simple example of cleanliness, today, the way kids are looking at the entire thing, if their father or mother are throwing a chips packet out of the car, the kids tell them this is wrong to do, don't do it. Same kind of change has to come from kids, children in the field of water also. If a tap is open, they can tell their parents, close it. It's wrong. So we have to start from there. Last, as a trainer, I often say no technology can succeed unless people understand it, own it, and are empowered to act on it. You bring best technology, do not involve people, do not involve communities, and you are inviting failure. So, sustainable water management is not just about sensor and smart meters. It is also about awareness, local engagement, and political will. So, ultimately, the future of sustainable water management will require us to blend the precision of science, the wisdom of tradition, and inclusiveness of community. And I don't know how to focus on all these aspects again and again, but this is all I like to say once we open this discussion today. Back to you, Shrestha.
Beautifully said, sir. In fact, you have very well covered the different aspects of what we are going to discuss in this panel discussion. And children as change agent are really something that we can think of, and they are our future, and they will definitely build our future. Very rightly said, sir. Now, my next question goes to Mr. Hardip Grewal. As Chief Sustainability Officer at Quality Austria, Central Asia, you have spent a good part of your professional life, close to 4 decades, working at the grassroots or base level. Are human rights violated when National Water Policy 2012 has emphasized on treating water over and above the preemptive need for safe drinking water and sanitation as an economic good?
So, good morning, Shrestha, and good morning, everybody here. And a big thanks to Exneco, not just for having me here, but more than that, for organizing the event itself, where you put us together and
Thank you, sir.
given us an opportunity to spend the day together. So, thank you. So, when you were asking me that, I was a bit scared. I was a bit scared because you are asking me to tread into political territory. However, I'll bite the bullet and go ahead with it. So, if it's a tick box response, my response to that, yes, human rights are being violated, even though it's a policy that the nation is supposed to adopt. But that still gives us the right to criticize it and amend it to make it better. How does that happen? I was actually searching for words also, and some people came across with some very beautiful words. They said water for all, not all the water for some. So that aptly sums up why it amounts to some violation of human rights. See, the issue is that every person living on the planet should have access to water, at least in amounts that are for personal consumption. And that access needs to be free, at least for people who cannot afford to pay. If you're charging me, a gentleman sitting in an air-conditioned room with a tie and a coat for the water that I use, it's understandable. But if you're charging somebody who is living below the poverty line and who doesn't even have 100 rupees to spend in a day, and say that you need to pay the same volume amount of money or even half the money that Mr. Grewal is paying for the water, then it amounts to a violation of the human rights of that person. So when you treat water as an economic good, then you are actually giving license to do some things that bite into the life of the other party. See what the net effect of this thing is. The net effect of this thing is that we can have a beer factory in a state which is paying 1 paisa to anywhere between 1 paisa and 3 paisa for the amount of water that it is using. And right next to that beer factory, you could have a community of tribal people living, and the women in the community in the dry months may be paying as much as 1 rupee for a liter of water from the same resource that the beer factory is getting it. So when you eventually end up with a situation like this, then you need to keep the document aside and think of life in a very straight way. And then you start realizing that it is this license that is given by certain policies, by decisions, that encroach on the rights of the common people. So even if it has a word that after everybody's needs have been met, it needs to be treated as an economic good, the system actually doesn't work in that way. The system works in a way that across the length and breadth of the country, people are being starved. Poor people are being made to pay for water. And in huge cities like Delhi and Bombay, there are any number of rich people who live in apartments with private swimming pools. So this disparity itself defines that it is a human right that's being violated. And I really don't have any two thoughts on that. Um, Having said this, I definitely am not advocating equity in terms of water use, but there has to be a system that ensures free access to water for a large number of people who cannot afford to pay for it. And see, this is not a question that's just before India. There are countries in the world who have instituted laws that ban the privatization of water in any way. So Uruguay is an example, Nicaragua is an example, the Netherlands is an example, and if I quote these three examples, they are countries with different. One is a very developed country, the others are poor countries, like much poorer than us. So if we have tracts of rivers in our country being handed over to private corporations, and farmers in the vicinity of those rivers also cannot encroach along the kilometers that have been allotted to a certain corporation, then we really are in a messy situation. And we need to think about it, reflect on that, and make corrections. So, yeah, thank you.
Very rightly said, sir. In fact, there are times when we need to keep aside the documents and look at life. That was really nicely said. And that actually tells us what needs to be done. So now we move to the next question, which goes to Mr. Prantik Chakraborthy, currently working as a regional manager for sustainability services of India. Middle East, Africa, a region of TUV Reland Group. What inter-region differences in water management are you observing?
Thank you, Srishta, and good morning to all. It's a privilege to be in this forum with this expert panel. So now, when we say the inter-regional differences within this large region of Indian subcontinent, Middle East, and Africa. So let me start first by India, and I will just try to portray the stark differences in the water issues. So for India, as Dr. Rana has already dealt upon, the major issue is the overexploitation of the groundwater. I mean, 1/4 of the global groundwater extraction is being done in India. So that is the major issue. So I will not get more in details on that matter. We can discuss India in the later phase also. Now, this is India, right? And now, when we see Bangladesh, the water problem is not the exploitation of groundwater. At least the first priority one problem is not that. Rather, it is the contamination of the water, fresh water. And that is largely due to the backbone of Bangladesh's economy, that is the textile sector. The use of dyes and chemicals in the textile sector is leading to this contamination of the fresh water. And that is the problem for Bangladesh. Now, when we come to the issue of the contamination problem, there are management techniques like there are standards like ZDHC management systems like ISO 14001. There are water audits being carried out. Brands and retailers, they are playing a very key role in Bangladesh's water contamination problem. Okay, so just to touch, went a step back to India. In the management of water exploitation nowadays in India also, we see a lot of audits going on for the water positivity and water efficiency. We do a lot of audit for India also, and many sectors in India, they are coming up, especially the IT and FMCG sectors. Now, we can debate upon the fact how material the water efficiency or water positivity for IT sector is, but at least it's a good step ahead. Right, so we see this changes and this initiatives in India as well. So India, contrast to that, there is the Bangladesh where the issue is completely different. And now, if we come to the Sri Lanka part, the issue is again different. It is not as industrialized as India or Bangladesh, I would say. So their issue is mostly the water scarcity or water stress due to the climate change. We see recently in northern Sri Lanka, there is a drought going on, and in southern Sri Lanka, there is flood. Most of the Sri Lankan economy is driven by the agriculture, and therefore it is being hugely impacted due to this water stress due to climate change. So this is the Indian subcontinent. Now, when we come to Middle East, it's a completely new story. So in Middle East, we know that the region is being defined by the water scarcity. So their major issue or even their major dependence is the desalination of the seawater. And therefore, Middle East is way ahead in technologically to manage their water, implement circularity in the water usage, reuse the desalinated water. And countries like UAE, Saudi, Qatar, they are doing a lot of work in this front. And now in the recent days, we see the AI-enabled metering technique and zero liquid discharge technologies are being adopted more and more in Middle East. So this, you see the India subcontinent and the Middle East, there are two completely different stories. Now, if we go to the Africa, and when I say Africa, I mean the mostly middle and southern part of Africa, like starting from in the east from Kenya to probably in the west up to Nigeria, the whole portion of the middle and southern Africa. The problem is more fundamental, and as Mr. Grewal touched upon, it is the access to the fresh water. That is the major problem we see. And almost around, I'm not sure about the number, but around 400 million sub-Saharan population are still struggling to access the basic water, fresh water and basic infrastructure for sanitation. So therefore, we see the problem is more foundational in Africa. In recent days, obviously, the private and public partnership projects and big corporate projects are being taking place, and they are having some good impact. However, I must suggest that there is a lot to do in Africa. In my recent visit, I have seen horrible situations in countries like, especially in countries like Kenya. yeah. So the problem to access of water is a big issue in Africa. So within this EMEA region, I can say there are stark differences in the sub-regional water issues. When in the Indian subcontinent, we see the water pollution, water exploitation is the issue, and we have to work on the management of such. In Middle East, they have already done whatever they could on that front, and now they are one step ahead of desalination, management of desalination of seawater. And then Africa, it is much behind in the race. So yeah, I think this is what gives a good picture how the EMEA region looks like in the water front.
Yes, in fact, very wonderfully covered when we talk about the different regions, how the challenge is different at different places, and we cannot have one policy or one kind of water conservation system for the whole world, or even within the country. Also, it would differ. So now coming to my next question, that goes to Dr. Sanjay Rana. Sir, you have carried out geophysical investigations for more than 2,000 projects, including projects in India, Afghanistan, Bahrain, Singapore, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Nepal, Bhutan, Kuwait, etc. So, where do we stand as a nation when it comes to water management?
Very good question. Uh, and I'll just take it forward from Mr. Chakraborty, what he said. You see, in different countries, it's a different problem, and different approaches have to be there specific to the problem. Now, Middle East, for example, they have what we call real water scarcity, right? And they are extremely rich in energy. For them, the solution is desalination. Simple, right? In India, we do not have the problem of scarcity of water. We are very lucky to have such rich groundwater resources, surface water, etc., etc. For example, you go to Saudi, you won't find a river there, right? Here we have so much of rather sometimes problem of excess water, which manifests itself as floods, right? So we do not have the water problem as such. We have water management problem. And that's why we are talking of India, we have to look from that particular lens. So, having worked on these 2,000 geophysical investigations across India and several other countries, which you mentioned, I definitely have had the chance to observe a wide spectrum of approaches to water management. So, in many ways, I think India is at a very, very critical juncture. So, on one hand, we have this very rich legacy of traditional water harvesting systems, which we talk about. Thankfully, initial two speakers of this summit talked about it. Step wells, tankas, johars, and community tanks that are perfectly suited to local geographies and climates. But over time, we have moved away from these sustainable, decentralized systems and increasingly relied on over extraction of groundwater and large scale supply driven schemes. See, today also, if you look at it, most of our schemes are focused on how to increase the supply, be it more groundwater extraction, be it more surface water tapping, etc., etc. It's all about supply side, supply side, supply side. So where do we stand today? I would say at a point of contradiction. Technologically, we are very capable. We have excellent institutions, bright minds, access to modern tools for mapping aquifers, monitoring water quality, managing demand. Like, where are we lacking? We have everything. But institutionally and behaviorally, we are lagging a lot. So water continues is still it is seen as abundant, cheap resource, even in areas facing acute scarcity. So that is where we stand today. We have everything available. We have water, we have technology, we have everything, but we do not have accountability. We do not have the institutional mechanism, and we do not have the right behavioral approach towards water management. So compared to some of the countries I have worked in, for example, in Singapore, water reuse and recycling are mainstream. Qatar, every drop is accounted for. Okay. In India, we still treat water as a public good without adequately accountability or price mechanism. As the first speaker of this panel discussion also said, till the time you're using water for your meeting your own demand, that is fine. But when the same water is being used to make a bottle of Coca-Cola or a beer or something like this, where you're extracting this water for commercial good, you cannot keep the same thing, same price mechanism for both, right? So that has to be taken care of. Our groundwater governance is particularly weak, and we often lack real-time data to inform decisions. This brings me to a very good example. I was hired by a consulting firm way back, I think in 2000, 2001. And my job was to carry out a project of groundwater modeling in Oman. Now, what we did there, we did extensive investigation, including geophysical investigation to understand the aquifers. We did extensive investigation to see the hydraulic conductivity of the soil. We did extensive study on the rainfall pattern in the area. Based on that, based on all this data, we created a model, a groundwater model of the area, which was governing that how much extraction people will be allowed to do in that area so that the groundwater level does not deplete and it remains at the same place. That is, whatever is being recharged, only that much is being extracted. Now, that is what we call the right approach of management. That groundwater model also addressed to the issue that, let's say there are 5 dry years, all right, how this extraction will be toned down. That if there is one dry year, now extraction will come down by this much. Like this. This is the approach. We cannot just keep extracting water thinking that it is infinite resource. It is not. It has taken thousands of years for that water to get there and accumulate there. Well, so as I said, always say, I'm an eternal optimist. So the good news is we are waking up. Like Jal Shakti Abhiyan, the push for aquifer mapping, growing awareness around water budgeting, they're encouraging signs. However, to truly transform, we need to shift from supply-centric to demand-sensitive approach, where we should combine science with community participation. Any number of questions you ask me in today, tomorrow, or any time to come, I'll keep harping on community participation. Water is a resource which you cannot work on sitting in Delhi in air-conditioned rooms. Community participation is mandatory. And then we have to treat water as a shared, finite, and critical resource. Shared, finite, and critical, not just a utility. That mindset has to change. So we have the tools. What we now need is alignment between policy, practice, and public behavior. The day we are able to achieve that through platform like this, for people like you who are working on this, that's the time we'll be able to truly address the issue of water management. Back to you, Shrestha.
Thank you, sir. Very nicely said. In fact, we are lacking in water management. It's not that we do not have water. We do have water, but we are not respecting what we have. So there's a lot to be done in this direction. And now I move on to the next question, that is to Mr. Hardip Grewal. Sir, you have dabbled in science, technology, innovation, policy analysis at the national and international levels. Kindly share with us the mitigating climate change and preserving kindly share with us for mitigating climate change and preserving the planet. What water conservation technologies are at our disposal in India?
Thank you, Shresha. In the limited time that I have, I will begin by holding Dr. Rana's hand and saying that to me also it appears to be something about demand management instead of just focusing on supply. See, the way I understand the country, we have about 78% of the water being used for agricultural activities. The remaining 22% sort of gets roughly divided between industrial use, domestic water use, and say about 1/3 of that would be, say, 7-8% of that being used for other activities, which includes aquaculture. So if we do not talk about the huge 78%, then we are in effect not talking about anything. I would restrict myself to listing 5 things that I think that can be done and done in an affordable way. I am for experimenting with all kinds of technologies, but when it comes to implementation, I believe that we need to be wise in terms of our pockets. So I am just talking of 5 things that can be implemented in a cheap way. And to start off, the practice of irrigation in our country primarily is flood irrigation. You have a field, either you draw water from the earth, or you draw water from a pond or a river, or you take it from a canal provided by the government of India, and you flood the field with the water. This is not something very wise, because you tend to leave a lot of water to get evaporated from the field. And the other associated problem is that the fields are not level. So you could have a field like this, where water accumulates in one portion of the field, and the farmer wants to ensure that water is in all parts of the field. So land needs to be leveled. We live in an age where you have laser leveling of land. These are tractor mounted equipments, not very expensive. And actually, what has been done for some patches of land in Haryana and Punjab can be done all over the country. And if lands were leveled, this excess of water that goes because just of the gradient of the land gets wasted would not be wasted. That's one. The other thing is that before a field is watered, there has to be a scientific measurement of the actual moisture in the soil before it is watered. These devices, soil moisture measuring sensors, are pretty cheap these days. If you have a balcony garden, you could buy something for as cheap as 200 rupees on Amazon. And if you happen to be a farmer, you could buy a reasonably okay device for about 2,000 and 2,500 rupees. So this practice of measuring soil moisture before irrigation happens needs to be measured, and it is something very doable. The third thing is that whenever you are planting crops where there is space between plants, it makes sense to go in for some investment and invest in drip irrigation systems or precision irrigation systems, where the surface of the land is kept dry, and the water is not allowed to evaporate from the surface, and it's just given where it's needed. So you can conserve a lot of moisture that way. Just 2 more things, and I don't squeeze into the time. One is that there has been a practice all over the world, and which time and again gets forgotten, and that is mulch. Cover the field with organic stuff, anything apart from where the plants are. Cover the spaces between the plants with mulch so that water doesn't evaporate. So mulching is a practice that needs to be encouraged on a large scale to conserve water. The last thing, again, before winding up and go and hold Dr. Rana's hand, and he talks of community engagement, I believe in the same. So catchment upkeep, which another gentleman who was talking earlier on is one of the keynote speakers, spoke of filling up a lake in the vicinity of Bangalore with water, because they went and managed the catchment. Catchment upkeep, proper catchment upkeep, is something that requires community education and community participation, and we should engage in that. So that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, rightly said, sir. In fact, water management, when we talk about it, we have to understand what is the requirement of water. And we should not overuse water. And definitely understanding the moisture level of the field and accordingly, irrigating the field. These are small steps, but then they can go a long road in actually conserving water. Very rightly said, sir. So now we move to the next speaker, Mr. Prantik Chakraborthy. And my question to you is, which are the most water-intensive industries in India at present, and what solution do they have at disposal for effective water management?
Thank you, Srishta, for that very interesting question. We at UV Renled, we are basically a certification, auditing, and inspection body, right? So we work with several industries across the spectra. Just a disclaimer, as a strategic decision, we don't work with the agri and farming sector. Therefore, I will restrain myself from commenting on that or include that in my list. But apart from that, we often see 4 to 5 industries as our clientele and as our customer base, where the water use is very heavy, very high. I mean, we can start with the thermal power generation, the power sector first. They use probably a largest portion of the industrial water usage in India. And often in older power plants in India, they still have this once through cooling system, which is very inefficient in the use. So they can top the list, certainly. Secondly, I can say the textile and apparel industry, as expected, they are one of the notoriously high water usage industry, and sometimes for the wet processing, which includes the dyeing, the printing, the finishing of the fabric, it takes almost up to 200 liters of water for 1 kg of fabric processing. They are very water intensive in terms of industry. And then we can take the sister industry, that is the chemical, and also include the pharmaceutical in it. So for the chemical and pharmaceutical, at least for the pharmaceutical, very water usage is a problem, because they need very ultra pure water. For pharmaceutical purposes, also for the chemical purposes, they need the same. And therefore, a large of wastewater is being generated. And also, it sometimes involves the restricted substances in the wastewater, and wastewater contamination is a big problem in the chemical and pharmaceutical industry. And then we can name probably the pulp and paper industry, that also uses a lot of water. And also in their water, the other concern is the very high BOD in their effluent, in their wastewater, that is the biochemical oxygen demand. And that again causes the water pollution and water contamination. And then, at the bottom of the list, I can certainly take the name of the, probably as mentioned earlier, the food and beverage industry. Now, in terms of usage, the volume may not be as high as the other peers in the list for food and beverage industry. However, as very rightly pointed out by Dr. Rana, that the water used for the domestic purposes and the water used for the industrial purposes, the pricing of the water, etc., has to be taken into account, and that accountability is still not there in India. And often, therefore, this industry is very highly scrutinized in India. At least we see that there are government and non-government bodies which try to scrutinize this industry. Now, if I come to the solution part of all this problem, as I mentioned, as a consultant at heart, I'm a very big fan of frameworks, So I have this one framework I always ask my team to use, that is the input process output framework. So we can see the solution can be in this framework for all these industries. We can see, like, for input framework, for example, for industries like chemical, or industries like textile, if we use the chemistry, the green chemistry, or if we use the chemical substances without the restricted or heavy metal substances as an input, therefore we won't have the contaminated substances at the output. So that is one solution. They can easily take into account for dyeing, for other chemical purposes. They can use they can go for alternative substitute substances and reduce their water contamination. That is one at the input level. At the process level, as I mentioned, for the power generation industry or for the textile industry also, for power generation industry, they have these once through cooling systems. They had to be upgraded. For textile industry, for the dyeing machine, nowadays there is a low liquor ratio dyeing machine are available, which uses less water, which reduces the contamination also. For industries like paper and pulp, they have to use the systems or use the greener technology to reduce their water usage for paper production as well. So that is the process level. And at the output level, it is always, as it has been already discussed several times, the circularity and the treatment of the wastewater. Now, if we have a good ETP system, and when I say good, every industry has its own parameters for being a good ETP system. For example, for textile industry, we have systems like standards like ZDHC, etc., or HIG. They tell what is a good ETP system is. For paper and pulp, it has to be even better than the textile industry because it has to take care of the high BOD. For chemical industry, it again has to take care of the several chemicals coming out. So therefore, it has to take care of that matter. So for ETP system, it's a whole new story. For each sector, we have different standards for ETP given out by different bodies. And those standards has to be maintained, and the ETP systems has to be up to the mark. Apart from that, the circularity has to come into picture for water. The ZLD, the zero liquid discharge kind of a technology, has to be integrated at the output, and thereby we can reach less water usage, and we can slowly move towards a water positive scenario for all these sectors. So in India, we see that at least for the major sectors, like as I mentioned, there are works being done. However, the work has to be a lot of work has to be done, and a long way ahead is still left for us.
True.
Yeah.
Very rightly said, sir. We have a long way ahead when it comes to water management, and this discussion which we had was very enriching. I thank Dr. Rana and Mr. Hardip Gerwal and Mr. Prantik Chakraborty for this beautiful discussion, wherein they brought about the various aspects of how water has to be managed and what are the things we should look into, and a global perspective. Also, we saw that why we are where we are lagging, and we have a long way to go. We take this. We come to the end of this panel discussion, and we now move on to the next panel discussion, that is on role of consultants in green business and water conservation.